Okay, what about now? Do you hear noise now? That feels better. Yeah. No? Okay. Now this is concerning because I at least have somebody watching it, but they tell me there's no sound. Hey, there is sound. What a great day. Thank you, Resley. So all of the one people watching this, and this will be recorded for a podcast episode. I don't know if there's a way to trim that whole like 3 minutes of not sound. But because I don't know if there's any way to get it back, I'm going to just start over and do the spiel again. So, welcome to They Might Not Be Crazy, the podcast where we take people's controversial opinions and hot takes, break them down to understand why they might not be as insane as they first appear. This is the first time I'm live streaming this. Obviously, there have been some complications already, but you know what? We live and we learn. Hopefully, over time, we get people in the chat and we can talk about kind of both sidesing a lot of controversial issues. I have been trying to do this podcast for a while. I've had a few episodes, but the issue is it's been challenging to find people who have strong opinions, are well spoken, and want to be on a podcast. Most of the time, when people want to be on a podcast, they're promoting an idea or a book or a product. And usually that idea isn't too weird. And there are people out there with weird ideas, but they usually aren't comfortable putting that out there. They're a little bit shy about it or ashamed about it. So, what I'm going to do to fill in the gaps, hopefully, I will still be able to find some of those guests. But while I fill in the gaps, I'm going to just take the controversial statements and hot takes I find on the internet, either on my videos or just wherever people post them anonymously, and we'll analyze those in the let's look at all the different angles of this that I usually do on my videos on YouTube, but in a less structured and edited way, more people chatting. I am not practiced at live streaming, and so it will take me a while to figure out how to talk about things and also respond to comments. So, yes, thank you. It would have felt really awful to get to the end of this and then realized there was no audio the entire time. So thank you for catching that. And this will be a good practice for me. And today really is the practice. We're going to start with my very own controversial opinion. And again, hit all the sides of it. If you are watching live, feel free to jump in with thoughts and comments. But when I give a keynote on this topic, on the idea of let's challenge our assumptions, let's question whether people might not be as stupid or evil or crazy or whatever label we want to slap on them as we first think. The way I do that is I get an audience member mad at me because I want to model conflict resolution and I want to model it in a way that gets people heated, much like politics and religion does in real life for people. So I had to think, how can I get someone really mad at me, but in a way that I'm not diving into abortion or gun control or something like that, that the event organizer is going to say, why did I hire this guy to get on stage and start talking about abortion? Because you just can't tackle some of those topics in that setting. So I needed a non religious, non political opinion that I would be willing to voice publicly and walk through with someone, but that would still get them genuinely, sincerely mad at me. And what I eventually came up with is that I would say increasingly controversial things until someone was really upset. And it had to do with dogs because people really like dogs. So I would start with I like cats more than I like dogs. Some people don't like that, but difference of opinion. Then I would go to I don't like dogs, which is mostly true. And there would be people that are like, that's not okay. And eventually I reached a point where I told someone I would rather eat a dog than own a dog. And oh my goodness, that is how you make people mad. Because guess what? People really like dogs. And every time I get someone who will come up and be really mad at me for saying I'd rather eat a dog than own a dog, and we can talk it through. It isn't hard to be the devil's advocate here for why my own opinion is bad. People like dogs. People, many people have dogs that they view as their family, as something that they are raising right there with their children. Maybe they don't have children and the dog functions as their child. There is a deep emotional attachment to dogs. Eating them is very taboo in many cultures and considered absolutely awful. Like, this is the easiest argument to make ever. Like, nobody would eat a dog. In fact, the governor of South Dakota is in really hot water right now because she wrote a book where she mentioned that she shot a dog that was getting aggressive. And people were like, why? Like, you can't shoot a dog. That would be horrible. If even if it is in a spot where it is a danger to people, there you can find a rescue or have it at least properly euthanized. People are really sensitive about dogs, and internet culture has made that even more so. So it doesn't go over well. And then I have to explain my side of why would I say something. Obviously, I'm making it a little bit more extreme because I'm trying to inflame a reaction. I'm trying to get people to come up and like, oh, how could you? Why would you ever eat a dog? In my head, I have it in my head that I could go up to someone and say, "I want to eat your dog," if no one gets mad enough, but I've never had to do that, and that's not true. I wouldn't eat your dog, and I don't hate all the dogs, but I have lived internationally. I've spent time living in China, I've spent time in a lot of different places, and I have friends in all the different countries, lots of international experience and relationships. And there are a lot of countries that eat dogs. And I was exposed to that from a pretty young age. And so I grew up thinking of that as a somewhat viable option. Not only that, but I've eaten lots of weird things in those travels. I've eaten scorpions and rattlesnakes and fish eyes and chicken feet and lots of things that, at least in the North Americas as a whole, think US, Canada, and then I guess the Western world a lot, like Europe, Western Europe. People don't eat those things a lot. And so there are expectations and taboos about food that I had to get over because I was living places where you're given food and you don't totally know what it is and you just eat the food. And a lot of those barriers broke down. If I were better at live streaming, and some of this is going to end up being an audio format, so we'll see. I would put up the picture. There's the PETA billboard that had the pig and the cow, and then a rabbit, and then a dog and a cat, and they were saying, "Where do you draw the line? When does it stop becoming food, and when does it become a pet?" And someone drew a line between the horse and the cow, I think, and said, "Right about there." Cows are good to eat, horses aren't. And I actually somewhat agree with PETA there, which is rare for me because I would also eat a horse. Like, I don't go out there trying to eat horses. I haven't eaten a horse. I don't have any plans to eat a horse. But I don't see the extreme taboo because I've had to break down those barriers in order to just live some of the places I have lived. And I don't go out there trying to eat cats or dogs either. Like, that's not something I actively do. I think the larger issue that the people who are mad at me when I say that, we actually have a commenter here saying that they've eaten a horse and they don't remember it tasting very good, which I think is why a lot of people don't eat horse. And honestly, it's probably why a lot of people don't eat things like cats either. But then again, there are places that eat guinea pig, which feels like it's a giant pain in the butt for not that much meat. And chicken feet are an absolute waste of time. There's no meat on there and they claw up the inside of your mouth. Horrible experience. There's a whole different conversation to be had about what foods are actually good. But a lot of the things that get people upset, and the reason you get people way more upset about eating horses and dogs than you usually do about cats, is because horses and dogs are animals that are very social and they form really close emotional bonds with humans. And that feels messed up to form close emotional bonds with something and also eat it. Again, especially in Western culture. But dogs in particular have this role in our society where they are special and they are meaningful and they are pure and they are good and they are all of these things. And I think when people are mad at me for that statement, which again is intentional, I want them to be mad at me for that statement. What they are usually mad about is they're almost just as mad at me not liking dogs. I think if I said I hate dogs, I would get almost as extreme of a reaction as I do saying I would rather eat a dog than own a dog. Because most people fairly quickly can say, "Oh, there are a lot of places that eat dogs." I have friends in Tonga that eat dogs. I have friends in China that eat dogs. Southeast Asia is all about eating dogs. I have some friends in the United States that have eaten dogs in some poorer areas. So I think that line people grasp pretty quickly. But the idea that I don't want a dog and that I would rather eat one than own one is one that they often struggle with until I tell this story. And this is the story of the other side of the devil's advocate. Now, I've said my controversial opinion. We understand why it's a controversial opinion and why it might be wrong. We understand half of why it might not be wrong, which is that cultural sensitivity. Who are we to say that our culture and our view of what foods are okay is right? Very ethnocentric to say the things you eat are bad and the things we eat are okay. So we've addressed that, but what about the concept that I just don't really like dogs that much in general? How can I not be evil because dogs are good? And so I tell the story that I grew up raising sheep, and the sheep were our livelihood. And we had neighbors who had dogs, and they didn't take very good care of them. I mean, they took good care of them, but they didn't control them. And so year after year, we had dogs get into our land, and they would kill our sheep. Now, we had coyotes that killed the sheep too, and that was annoying. But when a coyote is coming into the pasture, they are hungry and they kill a sheep, usually a lamb or an old one, the sick and the weak, and they eat it and they leave. But dogs aren't hungry. So when the dogs would come in, they were playing and they would kill 10, 20, 30 sheep, usually lambs, and they wouldn't kill them. They'd play with them. They'd mutilate them, they'd hurt them, but leave them alive. I mean, just horrible, horrible, awful things that I would get demonetized and kicked off of YouTube if I described in detail. That would happen to these tiny little cute lambs that I then had to go clean up the mess. And then we would go to the dog owners and say, "Hey, you have to control your dogs." And they would talk about how wonderful and well behaved and perfect the dogs were. And it's like, we saw them. We almost shot them. Like we would have if we had the chance, because these sheep are our livelihood. And these dogs are costing us tens of thousands of dollars. There was actually one instance where the county, like the sheriff themselves, took the people to court for being a public danger with their dogs. And the owner would sneak onto our land in the night and steal the dead bodies of the lambs to hide them so we wouldn't know that her dogs had killed them. And I know that's not the dog's fault because they have instincts. And there's no bad dogs, there's just bad dog owners. But when you grow up from a very young age, having that be a constant battle, I mean, It was like a battle alarm. Like, get the call, go running, we're under attack. It's really hard to stop seeing them as the enemy because over the course of my life, some of the worst things I have seen and experienced came at the hands of dogs. Just the suffering and the pain. And they cost our family probably hundreds of thousands of dollars all told. Not only were the sheep our livelihood that paid the bills and kept us alive, but we formed deep emotional connections with them. Many of them had names. Some knew basic tricks. They would come when you called. They had rich family structures and histories, and we knew them, and that was hard. It was hard to see them hurt, and it was hard to see them suffer. And again, I know it's not the dogs, but when something is deeply ingrained in you your whole life, it is hard for me to stop seeing them as the enemy. And I can see individual dogs as not the enemy now. When I meet a dog, I can give it the benefit of the doubt and say, hey, you're probably a nice dog, but I'm wary. And there were other experiences. The dog that bit my ankle and pulled me off my bike as a kid, the dogs that chased my sister home from school. Like, we had a lot of bad dog experiences. And when you're little, those are formative. And I'm getting better at saying, "Hey, I can understand why you love dogs. And I don't hate all the dogs. I just want someone to also understand where I'm coming from, that I am wary and I am concerned. And if I walk in a place and a dog jumps up on me, I have a panic reaction because I have been hurt by a lot of dogs." So if somebody said like, "Hey, do you just want a random dog in your house or would you rather have someone hand you a dog steak?" I probably would take the dog steak, not because I love dog steak, but because I have a history with dogs. And there there have been good dogs in my life, but there's this deep primal lizard brain part of my mind that is like, this is a predator, and this is a predator that has plagued you for a long time, and it has hurt and killed and scared, and I can get over it on an individual basis. I can get over it on each individual dog, but I don't walk out assuming that any dog I see is a good dog. Whereas that's kind of the internet trend. It's like all the dogs are good dogs. They all have beautiful souls and they all go to heaven. On a metaphysical level, they probably all do go to heaven because they don't have moral agency and they can't choose right and wrong. So, whatever afterlife there is, dogs probably go to the good version. But that doesn't mean I have to trust all of them or want them around me all the time. So, we actually have a comment here who someone said, "I can certainly understand where you're coming from," which is fundamentally the entire premise of the show. This is going to be shorter than usual because I'm mostly just testing stuff out here. But the idea here is collect the controversial opinions, identify why they're controversial and the valid points about why people won't like it, and then see if we can understand where both sides are coming from. So I love that comment, Resolif. I can certainly understand where you come from. I don't want you to agree with me, all two people who are currently watching this. I don't want you to have my opinion on this. And I don't think most people who have weird opinions want you to have their opinion. All they want is for someone to understand that they might not be crazy, which is why that's the name of the show. So, all told, I don't think the worst test run for live streaming. Had a little bit of an audio issue, but we caught it early. And this might be a decent format for figuring out the rest of this. What I need from you, anyone who sees or listens to this, because I think it will be on Spotify. I need you to gather controversial opinions for me. And not totally insane ones. Like, we don't want to go way out in left field, at least not for a while. But ones that should be talked about with some good and bad on both sides, and we can see where they're coming from. There are podcasts already out there. I think they're only on Spotify and not on YouTube, where we talk about putting ketchup on mashed potatoes and the oil industry on the brink of collapse. A couple of other topics where I have had guests be willing to come on. So that is happening, but I need the controversial opinions. And over time, I'll figure out this format a little bit better. And if you do know of a guest who has an area of expertise or wants to put their personal brand out there, who is willing to talk about a hot take that they have and defend it live and on the air, send them my way, because it turns out they are really, really hard to find. So I may not even end live streaming right now, but I probably will fairly soon. But at least for the audio version, I will call that and say that is the end of our first experimental new episode of They Might Not Be Crazy. And thank you so much for joining me. Go out there and make the world a better place. Now I should look at these comments and see if there's any of them I need to address. I'm going to figure this out eventually. Yeah, when I'm surrounded by bad dog owners, I won't see good dogs. And I saw some good dogs, but it's like that for every negative experience, you need like 7 positive experiences to balance it out. Turns out it takes a lot of positive experiences to balance out deeply traumatic and disturbing bad experiences. So that we're getting there. I'm around way less bad dogs now. So I've had a few years of generally positive dog experiences. I'm still probably not going to get one. When I'm just getting a pet that I want to have around, it's going to be an alpaca. Because why would I ever have a dog when I could have an alpaca? Great. In the end, we had 2 people watch this, so I don't know who it is aside from you, Resolute, but I also don't know how to end this. Anybody watches this in the future, they're gonna be like, wow, what a scrub. Dallin has no clue what he's doing. There it is. Cool. Thanks for being here. Tell your friends. Get me a controversial opinion. Now get out there